not sure how I can do that. But oh, how's that? That sounds better. Kia ora tātou, ko Mary Stewart, or is it O Stewart, taku ingoa. Yeah, today I'm not here as a council person, so forget that I work there. I'm talking about my community spare time, whenever that is. And I'm talking about the 100 Acre Block. So this is a community-led predator control program that I've been trying to get up and running. It's within the Long Bay Regional Park. And I'm working closely with Lynn Bingham, who turns out is in our bioinfo team, but we live not far from each other. So we got talking about what we could do. So today I'm just going to give a little bit of an update, background to the 100 Acre Block, the existing trapping we're doing, and how we've increased the predator control. And I guess just to set the scene, I have been working in the park since my daughter was born. I went back to Long Bay Regional Park because it's close to home when I went back to work. So I got to know the park rangers there, and I got to know the Tuesday volunteers. So there's a whole lot of people that work there, about 25 people that come in on a Tuesday and work for the morning. Some of them work all day, some of them come back on Thursday. So it's quite a tight-knit little crew, and I became like the weed person that they would ask weed questions. And then I started doing weeds myself. So it's evolved from there. And then in 2017, I met Colin. Colin was brought to the park by somebody else for a day. He got lost in the 100 Acre bush and said, "I'm never coming back." So, okay, that's not the job for you. And then he said, "Well, actually, I've just bought a house in the development area beside the wetland. It's full of weeds. Could you come and have a look?" So that was the end of my life, basically. I have not stopped since then volunteering. We started up a group called Friends of Long Bay. And that was just a group of us that wanted to work in the wetland next to his house doing weeds. And we soon found that it was really hard work, and we couldn't get the people that were moving into the area just physically couldn't do the work. So we started getting funding instead and getting contractors in to do that sort of work. But what could we do as volunteers was rat and possum control. So we started setting up some lines, and that wasn't really my area of expertise. So I thought, well, this is a good area of learning for me, and I started to quiz all my workmates and colleagues and anyone that wanted to talk about rats and pest control, and drove everyone mad, and eventually set it up. Just to the bigger context, we are part of the Hibiscus and Bays local board area. This is all the way from Waiwera down to Campbell's Bay, also along the Whangaparoa Peninsula, includes Shakespeare Regional Park and Turituri Mātangi. So we have some really cool areas of predator-free, pest-free, and birds starting to come back along the peninsula. And we're probably not far from that happening to us too, but we're not really ready. So that was my concern when I started with this. The area that we're talking about is the one in the yellow circle there, and you can see from our mapping significant ecological areas are all the green areas. This area isn't considered a significant ecological area, and yet it's like about 22 hectares. So I'll get into why that is. We've also got a Long Bay development there, which in many ways has been a negative with the sediment production. Things have got worse, but a lot of these wetlands have been created to try and combat some of that, and a lot of planting has been done. And of course, we've got a lot of people that we can tap into now who want to volunteer. So we've got some pluses and minuses with this happening. It's happened, so but fortunately it's been stopped. There's no further work that's going, no more houses are going into that area, apart from the ones that are heading in now. So looking at the satellite imagery of the 100 Acre Bush, it looks quite a good coverage of that, yeah, about 20, maybe 20 to 22 hectares of bush there. That's the 2020 satellite. But if you head back to 1996, which I think isn't very long ago, but apparently it's 25 years. So there was nothing, virtually nothing there. There were 3 big putakawa, which, hopefully I can work that, pressing the wrong button. 3 big putakawa there, which is still there. Pine trees, massive trees there, willows down the stream. So there's one gully here with the stream running down to Granny's Bay. And then the other area here, Naomi might know what was in there. I have no idea. Some native trees maybe? Not too much, yeah. So it was farmed, you know, basically there were cows there. That stream area is, and still is, was and still is willow. So we do have some exotic species that were in there, still causing issues. But yeah, there virtually was nothing there. So 2010, you can see that a huge effort had gone in already to rectify that and start planting up the far gully, and also starting to work. So sort of picked off a chunk every year, and that got planted by volunteers on a planting day or 10 over that winter period. And yeah, a lot of the plants got grown, the seed was collected locally, sent to the Botanic Gardens, grown, and the plants brought back, all grown on site in the little nursery there by the volunteers and planted by volunteers. So it's just been a really magic success of restoration, and a lot of different techniques. In the last 25 years, things have changed a lot in how you went about planting. So there are some areas that sort of are a bit slower than others, where it was pretty much wall-to-wall Manuka Kānuka, and that's about it. That's still in there, and that's starting to fail now, and other things are starting to slowly take over. But in other areas there were mixed plantings, so the Manuka Kānuka dies, the other things are already there, ready to go. And that's where we're at the moment. So that gives you an idea of what it looks like now after 25 years and various stages of restoration plantings. So it can look like on the left, pretty good cover, and then in one particular area under the pines, not a lot growing underneath. So we've got various types of habitat. But on the left there, that's all the kawi coming up underneath a kawi. So we are getting regeneration seedlings happening. We're getting food for birds. It's starting to become, you know, quite a good forest. So that's a bit about the history there. Then, yeah, about 2015, one of the rangers who's gone now set up some traps with Ian, I think it was at the time, and he's passed that on to John and John. We have 5 Johns at the park, so you can pretty much yell John and anyone will turn around. But it's John Poutney and John Gordon, who are the trappers in the 100-acre block. And they've been doing that for quite a few years now, and collecting all their data. And I spend a lot of time with them. They're hilarious. They have a great time. And they have a buddy, Harry, who's not into killing stuff, but he, you know, they do various jobs around the park, and they only go out once a month to do the 100-acre block. So that's their job. They go out by themselves, and the rest of the time they're doing various things that they want to do. They like the variety. That's why they're there, for the meeting people, getting on with others, and just they're retired and having a great time. And they bring a lot of life to the park and to the volunteers. And boy, you know, they do anything from painting to digging trenches. They chainsaw, drive the tractors, do anything that needs doing. And they didn't have any of these skills when they started. Like basically they retired, they retrained, went to work at the park. So, so these guys are amazing. And so I went out with them a couple of times and ended up asking them if I could GPS all the sites, because we didn't actually know where they were. And could I put them on TrappNZ? And then eventually during lockdown, I was like, could I load all your data into TrappNZ and sort of analyse it and see what's been happening? So they were all cool about that. And yeah, it sort of showed that particularly the area, mostly they're catching rats in the DOC 200s. They're getting all the possums. There's very few possums, we think, in the reserve. We're just getting reinvasion from other areas. But this area is all harakeke, flax. They love it down there, the rats, and along this coastal area where there's not a lot of pest control happening, and on the corners, I guess. And we didn't have anything down the streams in those areas. So that sort of shows their trap catches over that period until January 2020. Getting a few stoats and weasels as well, possums and hedgehogs. And I started looking at the layout, and some of them are quite close together, probably closer than they need to be. Some of them are quite far apart. There's huge gaps in the middle and in those habitats of stream areas in there. And also ideally the docks would be there for stoats, but if they're catching a rat, they're not going to catch the stoat. So I think, you know, could we do something to make this a little bit better? And these guys, they are at capacity. They don't want to really change what they're doing. They want to go once a month, that's it. They don't want to be there every week doing the same thing. So at this point I spoke to the BioInfo team and I worked with Alice, and she did some work with us, also Ashley White. So she came out and said, well, this could be a potential layout grid that you could use. Do the bait stations for rats 50 by 100, do the possum trap layout 100 by 100, and the DOC 200 layout 200 by 200. So I didn't really want to annoy the guys and say, look, we're going to move all your gear right now, and maybe I'll just start with the bait station layout. So they were happy to hand any baiting over to us. They weren't really into that, so that was fine. So I got that far. Didn't really have any volunteers. And then, yeah, talking to Lynn and Kat, who are in the BioInfo team, they've been learning a lot about TrapNZ. And at that time, they were doing, you know, setting up regional parks with TrapNZ. They were working directly with TrapNZ, talking about how to improve it. And I said, oh, why don't you come out? I've got some stations that need to be put out. I don't really want to do it. Do you think you could put them out and you could practice, you know? And it's, for people that have sit behind giant screens all day, what more do they love than to go out and sit behind little screens and in the wild, you know? So I sent them out there and said, bye, I'll see you later after lunch. And yeah, 2 hours later I came back and they had set them all up. There were 12, I think they had that day to set up in Awarua Ika wetland, which was sort of our next wetland in the development that we wanted to get coverage, which is right next to the regional park and has an impact. These wetlands are like breeding grounds for rats that then run into the park. So these were areas that we were pretty keen to get covered. And also there's a lot of bird life in these. We're getting pied stilts and the putangitangi. Trying to breed, no, not in here. Yeah, anyway, it's very new planting, but it was an opportunity for them to learn and to get that gear out there. And also they realised that actually TrapNZ isn't as easy as it sounds. It looks like it's, yeah, you just press a button and you put in everything. I don't think Lynn could even get her phone working that day with it. So it's been a steep learning curve for them, and for them to understand on a community side of things that things aren't always as easy as it sounds. So then Lynn said, I said, oh, Lynn, would you like to take this wetland over? And she's like, oh, I've been volunteering at Okura Bush. It's quite a nice walk. It's a bit tougher. I like a bit of fitness. Have you got anything tougher? You know, it's a bit more of a challenge. And I'm like, yes, I have. So little did she know I had this all ready to go. Now, not quite. I had a few things to do before I could get there. Okay, so we didn't have any volunteers. We were starting to work on Lynn, and then Lynn said, oh, I'm going to ask my friends, and ended up with 12 family and friends joining her, which was just amazing. But then we had to get them all inducted. We had to do training. None of them had done any of this work before. They all work full time. and various professions from police, nurse, teacher, osteopath. So, you know, we had a full range of different people that had never worked in this area before. They're all brand new. The biggest issue we had was getting the gear, to be honest. We needed 62 bait stations and quite an outlay and a commitment from the regional parks to continue to supply us the gear and the bait and for an ongoing program. And it was COVID and there were budget cuts, and so we big borrow stealed, or the rangers did, all the bait stations they could get together, and we started putting them out line by line, and I think we were down to the last 12 that we couldn't get. And we finally got there in the end when we spoke to the managers and said, look, we've got 12 people trained, ready to go. Please, can we have 12 bait stations? You know, it's not a big call when you've got, and they were like, oh yes, of course, we must do that. So we got there in the end. Amazing summer rangers last summer, and Amy, a ranger in Northern Parks, and now I think she's working with the NETA program as well. She chainsawed one of the tracks that we actually didn't have access, and it is quite thick in that second gully now. So we were just chopping manuka, nothing major, just to try and find our way through there easily for volunteers. And of course we had to set up all the stations, tape them, GPS them, get them onto TrapNZ, and that was quite a big task. That was mainly done by myself, my son, Lynn and her husband. So it was sort of 4 of us that took on that task, and of course the staff behind us. Wendy set us up with an amazing area, and a system that people could come in at any time they want. They can unset the alarms, they can get all the gear that they need for the day and go out. Everything is just put there, and so we don't have to meet anyone at a particular time. There's no barriers. People that we're working with have shift work commitments. We just give them a window, please bait between this date and this date, and refill it between this date and this date, and that's enough for people to still be involved, but they go out in pairs, and it's mostly husband and wife teams. So we got the 6 lines in. That's my son there, willingly helping me every weekend. Sometimes not so willingly, but yeah, good experience for him as well to learn about this. And my nieces and my sister all got dragged out to do monitoring. At the same time as we were trying to get all the bait stations set up, we were doing monitoring because we wanted to have a beginning. You know, where did we start? How bad was it? You know, you get 10 years down the track and you can't remember what it used to be like. You see how quickly things can change from looking at those aerials. Lynn and I went out with Tim Lovegrove, and he gave us some training on the 5-minute bird counts up at Tawharanui. And he basically said it's easy. You just choose some sites on different types of areas, as long as they're 200 metres apart, and just go there and sit there for 5 minutes. And we worked out that we could put those directly into TrapNZ quite easily. Tim doesn't do that. He prefers to use a sheet to do his. But we felt comfortable enough with TrapNZ that we could do that. So we've got a couple other people in mind that we're going to train up and share the load, so we don't have to do all the bird monitoring. But even just doing 1 year, you can see that we're already seeing some interesting trends. So all the exotic birds we're finding, this is a separate area. This is the nature trail, which is quite established bush, getting a lot of miners and things around those areas, but less exotic birds in the 100 acre. So, but more native birds, and of course we're seeing the coastal blackback gulls, so that's probably influencing some of that as well. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what the species number change over time, what types of species we get. It's fairly thin on the ground at the moment, just the general ones that you might see in your garden even. We did tracking tunnel monitoring. We decided to do that rather than true cards, which seems to be the norm in most places. We chose 2 lines, getting a 450 metre line through a 20 hectare piece of bush, following all the stock protocol is impossible. This is the best we could get to. So the lines have to be 200 metres apart, which they are across different types of terrain. So they're going up and down gullies, through streams. So I think that's quite representative. We unfortunately couldn't stay away from all the traps and stations. They're everywhere, so it's nearly impossible for you to do an independent. It's going to give us an idea, but I don't think this would be statistically valid data that we're getting. But it's really engaging for the volunteers to see the change. So we picked up rats again. So the coastal area, the Harakeke, and the stream. So that was quite interesting, even just to see that. We did pick up other things. And we did wax tag monitoring for possums. We were just following the animal pest guidelines that have been put out, and they're on the Te Aki Tamaki Makaurau website. So you can get all these sort of guidelines. We just followed that. So these were allowed to be on the same line as the tracking tunnels, but they have to be closer together. So they're 20 metres apart. And that's basically to find possums. We didn't get any picked up on those, only mice. So yeah, it took us about a year and we got there in the end. We started baiting in August. And yeah, we're following this from the guidelines, the animal pest guidelines again. So these are the times we're planning to bait, and we're using bromadiolone at this stage. We might move on to difecinone later on, lower toxicity, but requires some more visits, basically 2 more visits during those periods. So that's quite hard for volunteers. I think we might need a few more if we're going to do that. COVID happened again just as we got the bait stations full, so it was a bit of a stretched out pulse, and Lynn and I, because we work for council, we had a little bit of loophole that they let us go and refill them. And we also had a lot of rain in that period, so we did end up taking out a whole lot of wet bait and disposing of that and putting fresh bait in. We just really wanted a good knockdown for our first ever pulse, so it was a bit excessive in the bait use, but we'll be much more, well, hopefully we'll be able to be more conservative on our bait use. The other thing that Lynn brought to the table was she uses WhatsApp with her family and her friends, and it wasn't something I was familiar with, but we've all joined up to this private WhatsApp and we message each other, and you know, sometimes people forget the code, or you know, they're wondering what date we're starting. They just flick a message to that and we can easily communicate. I don't know these people very well, but you know, certainly I can chime in with the advice easily from anywhere on my phone. So that's been so useful to learn about that. And I guess there's lots of different ways that groups choose to do this, but WhatsApp is working for us. And then Lynn's mother, you might sort of recognise a resemblance there. This will be Lynn when she's 85. Amazing. She is doing all our data entry. So she didn't know how to use an app or how to use TrapNZ. She's learnt the whole thing, and we still revert to writing our data on sheets. It's just too hard for everyone to even get reception sometimes and make it work in the field. That this is just simple. You take your clipboard, you fill it out, you bring it back. Lynn takes them to Sybil, and Sybil enters it all, and we get all the data out. So it's amazing. You don't have to be actively doing something in the field to be contributing to the project, and that's been really amazing for us to have her support. So this is what the data spat out from TrapNZ. Again, seeing that most of our bait take is down in that Harakeke and in the coastal wetland area. Not really surprising, I guess, I seem to find that everywhere, that rats love Harakeke, and it's a good place for them to hide. But also line 2 was quite interesting. That had the biggest bait take on average across the whole line. You can see the coastal areas there. So there's quite a lot of habitat on those edges. That's probably a good hangout for rats. So for our Christmas do, yeah, I have to thank Lynn. She did all these maps, and this was for a presentation for our Christmas party. So it was, it's all been stolen for today's use, but yeah, she put together these stats, and basically in August, the August polls, we ended up using a huge amount of bait, but also we removed, you know, sort of more than half of it. But we can send that up, we did send it up to Shakespeare, where they recycle that through the worm bins, and that, you know, makes it inert and safe to return to the soil. So our bait takes is useful to know. We did have quite a good bait take. The line 2 had the most on average. The least was line 4, which is sort of up on one edge, which is quite unusual. So there was a bit of competition going between who had the best line and the best active line. So Christmas party was all about, you know, coming first. Line 2 was Lynn's, so, you know, she was all about coming first. Although she did admit they made the most mistakes on their data sheets, so never mind. And of course, these people have never done pest control before, like, so finding a dead mouse in a bait station was like a big thing, so maybe not to us, but yeah, they were quite horrified. Although we won't get you onto possums quite yet then, okay. So yeah, Lynn and I won the most bait stations checked, and I ended up doing Elaine's down in another wetland, and yeah, I was lucky to be let out. I got a lot of fitness during a very short period of time, but I wouldn't want to do them all. I tell you, there's hundreds of them across the park. We had the speediest team, Fee and John. They were definitely, a lot of these guys are really fit, and they are in for the fitness. And so for them to sit on an app and wait for it to work, forget it. You'll be lucky if they write it down on the sheet. They're in a hurry and they're off. Apparently I was the least speediest because I reverted to type. I had to go and kill every moth plant in woolly nightshade. So, you know, I'm fired now from this program, and I'm really happy about that. I have no intention to continue, and I've handed it over. So Lynn really is their, you know, coordinator now, and, you know, I'm just sitting on the outside bringing new volunteers. I'm a talent spotter. That's what I've recognised my role as. I don't want to do the work. I just want to get people there and find them a job that suits them. So Kelly and Harry. Kelly is Lynn's daughter, and yeah, she's very active and always away most weekends. So yeah, she was keen to do the stuff, but only if it worked around the ski fields and other activities. So, and of course we had to have a competition for John of the Year. So first place was John, second place was John, third place was John. So they were all happy, they all won. So finally, what's next for us? We've got that rat control in, but we know we need to do more. There's always more to do. So adding in the possum control tools is probably what we're doing. Actually, we've got some AT220s going in on the Piri Piri coast at the moment that have already caught about 15 possums. So clearly that area's never been controlled before, so we're really having a knockdown of those. And that's so far for volunteers to go, so having a resetting type possum trap is quite, you know, attractive for us to use, so we don't have to get all the way out there. Yeah, we want to put more DOC 200s in the spaces and through the middle, and we want to extend the predator control on the coastal track further, the rat baiting as well. And then the nature trail, that one has fallen to me now to extend the nature trail bait stations. We don't have anything down in the Harakeke wetland at the moment, and we know that that's going to be a little habitat that we need to target. So we'll be heading down there, and I'll find some more volunteers hopefully that want to take that bit on. And yeah, we'll just continue what we've already set up in the 100 Acre Bush, and yeah, we every Christmas we'll get together and share our stats and, you know, share a bit of kai and carry on from there. So yeah, that's us. Thank you.
Anyone got any questions?
Oh. Uh-oh. Steve?
In the truck scopes, the 13 scopes, what bait was did you
The bait in the stoat traps has been normally fresh eggs, but they've changed a lot to plastic eggs now, which seem to still catch them. They also put peanut butter in those as well, so that's probably why they're getting rats and stoats. They have got some of the Good Nature, some of those new lures type things, putting those in, but really it's just the plastic eggs.
So the stoats see something that looks like an egg, and they can't tell that it's not an egg.
I found one in the paddock, one of the plastic eggs, and they're actually full of sand or something heavy. It had chewed a hole, like it must have spent hours trying to get through the thing and must have been really disappointed when he got in there. And I actually kept that egg, I've still got it for displays because I thought it was quite interesting.
Just an interesting sign that golf balls work really well as well. And they're lovely.
Yeah, and they don't go off, and you find them in every park. They're free. Yeah. What about it? If you want to go and have a look, it's all open to the public. So you just go to the end of Long Bay Regional Park and follow the signs to the coastal track and you'll head up there. Yeah. It's all well signed. It's a bit of a steep hill, but probably, yeah. A lot of people have called it the 100 Acre Woods by accident, so it's quite cute. Yep. Cool.
When you were doing the bird monitoring, you said it was kind of just pick some different habitats, so there was nothing more sort of scientific or randomised than that.
It was getting as many in as we could that were 200 metres apart. That's pretty much what we did, and following the tracks that we normally walk, and then trying to find some different habitats. So he was quite keen. Tim advised that we did some near the grass because we would pick up more of the skylarks, other species that spend more time in the grass versus the ones in the bush, but it's important to get both. Sarah? Thank you. No, I mean the layout that they've got there is huge. They've been doing possums in that particular area for many years. They are still catching them, but they're catching them in the top corner. So they're coming in from elsewhere, moving into the area, I think. So yeah, I don't think there's not huge evidence that they're there. There's no scratch marks or, yeah.
You mentioned about the SCA boundary line missing the 100 acre plot. My backyard, I've got 600 square metres of native bush, and they drew the line 50 metres away from my bush for a really big SCA. And it seems to be set in stone. There seems to be no concept of ever adding anything to those SCAs.
Yeah, it would involve a unitary plan change now, I think, to do that. I don't think it's impossible though.
It's a shame there isn't a way of drawing that line around my backyard.
Well, when I figure out how to add the 100 acre, I'll let you know how I did it. As long as you're not cutting it down is the main thing, Steve. Maybe put a covenant on it all. Yeah, there you go. Covenant's much stronger. Okay, thank you.
Any